the Telecommunications Bill 2023 has opened the door for administrative allocation of spectrum for satellite broadband services, which is the global norm for assigning spectrum to entities. This could be a big win for Bharti Airtel's OneWeb, Elon Musk's Starlink and Amazon's Kuiper. The assignment of spectrum, whether through an auction or administrative allocation for satellite communication, was at the heart of the debate between the government and a divided industry, with the Telecom department even asking the Telecom regulator TRAI for modalities around auctioning satellite spectrums. By allowing these companies to access spectrum administrative under the Global Mobile Personal Communication by Satellite, the GMPCS license, the bill aims to expedite the deployment of these services, potentially bringing high-speed internet connectivity to even the most remote corners of our country. The Telecommunications Bill 2023 outlines a comprehensive framework for various entities, including teleports, TV channels, direct-to-home, which is DTH, services, digital satellite news, gathering very small aperture terminals, and mobile satellite services operating in L and S bands. These services are now set to receive spectrum allocations outside of auctions, which could streamline operations and foster innovation within the industry. To talk more about this, joining us on the show is Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, Wing Commander S. Sudhakaran, former Indian Air Force Global Strategic and Defence expert, also joins us on the show. Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, DG ISPA, is also with us on the broadcast to talk more about this. Professor Nalapat, I can begin with you, sir. I hope you can hear me. Well, this is a big deal, sir, for the telecom sector. And, apart from being something that facilitates and propels transparency, this is also something which will come to the rescue of the remotest corners of the country, the last mile connectivity that we so often talk about when it comes to the rural populace of our country.
Essentially, Vineet, you're quite right. It is the spectrum, and frankly, this kind of technology in general can be a great leveler in the sense that it can open out advantages to those who would otherwise be very disadvantaged. If we were, in the absence of this kind of technology, the fact is that whether it is a question of learning systems, whether it's a question of access to the best information regarding health, the best information regarding agriculture, or any other profession that they're engaged in, it will be much more difficult. And ease of reach of such access to this kind of communication is very, very important. Internet speeds, as you and I know very well, it's very, very important to ensure that we have good internet speeds and we have good internet connectivity. And I must say that, in that sense, over the last few years, for example, you travel by rail or you travel by car and you put on your cell phone, there are very, very few locations where the cell phone does not work. Some signal or other gets picked up along the way. And as a consequence, you're always accessible on your cell phone. Now, that's one small way in which this kind of technology is helpful. There are multiple ways in which it can be helpful. And over the last 5 or 6 years, there have been conscious efforts to ensure that this kind of technology is disseminated throughout the entire population. And as a consequence, we have quantum improvements in productivity, quantum improvements in learning systems and health systems. And I think this is a process that's only going to continue, and this new policy will further give a boost to it.
You're absolutely right, sir. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, what's your take on this? This is obviously something that has been awaited since a long time. It is a practice in other parts of the world as well. And when we, talk about the telecom industry and, a number of improprieties that have taken place in the past, this also feels like a, breath of fresh air.
While breath of fresh air is accepted, while it is a positive move, but then India is a very peculiar country of sorts, because the kind of politics that this country witnesses and the chairs, you can't trust decision making with people. Administrative processes essentially means leaving the decision to a certain group of possibly bureaucrats and politicians. And that's why it actually is kind of a good and a bad kind of a policy. There are 5 goods, so there are 5 bads. Now, I do agree with Professor Nalapat that it will, lead to a faster rollout of satellite broadband services. It will actually, help boost innovation in the space sector. It will actually accelerate the whole process of, technology enhancement and industrialization in these emerging technology spaces. It will align with global practices. It will have reduced fiscal burden on the operators. That's very important because we have to understand that only 2 or 3 players have survived in the Indian highly competitive telecom market, and that's all courtesy our policies because we've systematically killed operators and we've left with 1 or 2 now. And there will be a lot of increased focus on national priorities. But having said that, you need to have a government system which is far more integral, which is honest about its deals, and it need to be sure about that. I'm not sure about it if the power corridors, witness a change because they will use the very same administrative processes to allocate not only spectrum but 10 other things, and they will go on tom-tomming to the town telling that what you do is right and what I do is wrong. The problem is not the process. The problem is with the people, and the moment wrong people sit in the wrong chair, then what you're going to have is a potential for unfair allocation. The wrong guys are going to get the spectrum. That is going to spell death knell for the country because the next generation of warfare is going to be increasingly space-centric. And therefore, these resources need to be controlled and need to be in secure and safe hands. So it needs to be allocated to, in a fair manner. The second thing is the revenue for the government is not going to be assured. We don't know how the prices are going to be determined administratively. How is it that going to happen? Because global practices sometimes don't work for India. And there are concerns about competition. Are there only a bunch of guys with big pockets who are going to lay hands on the spectrum? That needs to be seen. And then how does the administrative processes factor for flexibility for future needs? That means you need to draft the contract really well. You can't get into a hurry-burry kind of a thing and then play mayhem with these kind of allocations. And last but not the least, again, it will not only touch the space spectrum, it could, set a new precedent for a lot of domains to come. And that probably may not be good. So that's my take. 5 goods and 5 bads. We need more honest people at the chair, at the helm of affairs. I do trust the present regime, but not sure whether all the regimes in all the places, because it can even go down to the states. So I'll keep my fingers crossed, and because for what I have seen in the last 4 plus decades in this country, I would be circumspect.
All right. General Bhatt, your response to this, obviously this administrative method of inclusion is going to put India on an international map as well. It's good for the economy, it's good for the startup ecosystem, and like Professor Nalapat also said, that it's good for the common man who's been bereft of a number of this technological affirmation for a long time.
Now, I would start with firstly saying this is a very positive, forward-looking and far-reaching bill. We have to realize a bill which was there in 1880 and 1920, they have been transformed now. They've been changed now for the present realities. As far as what the previous speaker talked and a few of the ghosts he talked of the 2G scam, that is not applicable in space. In space, if spectrum is allocated to a group of people today, administratively, that does not deny it to people who will come in the future. Because spectrum can be shared. And that is why, if it was auctioned the way it is done for terrestrial, it would have segmented spectrum, it would not have been the optimum utilization. The government has heard all the arguments and taken this very far-reaching decision, which is globally harmonized. We are now going to have a fibered sky. And like Professor Nalapat says, we are going to connect the disconnected. Those deprived of broadband communication in far reaching and difficult geographies, where fiber from terrestrial means could not reach, will now be connected by broadband. And why is broadband important? It will bring up the economy of the area. Our people in the rural areas who require this broadband, be it for the economy, fintech, be it for education, be it for health, and even for entertainment. This will be now available everywhere. And that is why the cost of this, which by auction would have been falsely raised, will now be at a cost which will be affordable by the. It's a decision which has not been taken just for a lobby. I would say I today, as representing the entire Indian Space Association, representing most of the space industry, we are all very happy. It couldn't have been better. Had it gone the auction way, there would have been no growth in this nation industry, which is the hope for the future. We are really thankful to the government that after a debate which has gone for a long time, and I would share with you that one day every possible stakeholder was there in the room. We had an 11-hour discussion in TRAI talking of how space spectrum should be allocated. And largely by most of the space players, which we rightly believe that the best method was administered. And we are so happy about it. This will definitely give growth to New India, to the rural India, to the deprived people, and bring much more possibilities.
Of course, at the helm of these reforms is also India's budding and growing and promising space sector that has done well. And of course, 2023 was notable. If you talk about some of the leaps that ISRO has made, how is this area likely to in fact grow by quantum leaps as a result of what we have seen?
Vineet, is that to me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Look, I'd like to point out that India's main strength is the talent of its people. And when you go back to the United States, for example, you look at the giants of today, the Amazons, the Googles, the Apples, they basically started on a few hundred or a few $1,000s and a great idea. And then there was an ecosystem there that encouraged that particular great idea. So what is slowly happening over time is that now the banks, for example, they had a huge volume of uncollectible debt. As a consequence, they were very shy of lending. The fact is that if you have a great idea, it's not enough. You need somebody who can fund that idea. You need a regulatory system that can ensure that that idea is nourished. You need, in other words, if you're a seed, you need the right kind of soil and the right kind of nutrients for that seed to grow into the kind of immense tree that Amazon or Microsoft or Google have become. And India can be the home of the future Amazons, Googles, and Microsofts. After all, a lot of the talent that went into these startups were Indian. And that basically comes out of ensuring that this reaches as many people as possible, as many corners of the country as possible, and ignites, in the words of Abdul Kalam, as many minds as possible. Now, yes, there are difficulties. There are bad apples in the administrative basket. There's no question about it. Overall, I'd like to say I've come across many of them in the sense of administrators. And overall, I find they are highly motivated. And yes, there are a few who give a bad name, but overall, they're highly motivated. But the important point is in 2 or 3 years' time, transparency is going to become inevitable in most government processes. And finally, including in private processes. Because of the reliance on the digital systems, which this government has been encouraging very, very strongly, almost by accident, invariably, you're going to see an increasing transparency in operations. So yes, then what happens is that the bad apples get identified, and you have an ecosystem, where one tweet can go all over the world, and one tweet can define whether a particular product or a particular process is toxic or not. And from that point of view, it's in the hands of hundreds of millions of people who will be testing out this policy. And if there are a few, individuals who are trying to, in a sense, stunt the objectives of this policy, the objectives of the Prime Minister in ensuring this kind of policy, well, then they will be identified, and I'm certain they need to be sternly dealt with. So I'm not really worried about that. Let's be honest. We were kept as a people deliberately illiterate. We were kept as a people unable to read and write, unable to go to libraries and to read books, because that helped the ruling class, the colonial ruling class of the day, to continue to be, our masters. And today you have an era in which people, more and more, hundreds of millions of people, are now becoming not only literate, they're being literate for quite some time, but are now taking place in learning systems. I mean, I have been, frankly, quite surprised to find how the children of individuals who are working in manual jobs, I came across at least 3 of them the last 1 week. Their children are studying in universities. In fact, I had given a lecture in university, and I was driving to another engagement, and the gentleman who was driving me, the driver, he told me his son is studying in that same university on a scholarship. That is the kind of progress that is taking place. That is the kind of equalization of opportunity that is taking place. And that equalization of opportunity can be given a quantum leap by this of giving spectrum. Now, so far as 2G is concerned, quite frankly, the reality is that yes, there may have been some administrative mistakes, but in other countries, when you have administrative mistakes, you levy a fine, but the company survives. Here, entire companies were completely demolished. They were shut down. Whereas it would have been better to levy a fine or something like that and allow the company to continue, so there could have been more competition in the field. Now, I am very certain that the future will bring more competition. And I'm very certain the future will bring more transparency and more dissemination of this kind of outlook. Why? It's not only because of the government, it's because of the people. They are much more alert, and they are much more aware of all the various methods in their hands to make their voices felt. As I said, I repeat again, one single tweet can basically either show that something right is being done or expose it if something wrong is being done. One single tweet.
You're absolutely right, sir, and quite emphatic in what you've just enunciated. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, do you concur with what Professor Nalapat said, that this is the great equalizer? There are a number of companies, who did not want to fall through or go through, the spectrum allocation process, and that in a way was impeding a lot of progress in that area. And this particular bill, the telecommunications bill, apart from some of the other facilities and reforms that it's produced, is going to also take care of that.
I don't disagree at all. I couldn't agree more. That is the right step. It is the most ideal step to take. But what I highlighted was there are far too many foxes in the corridors of power for unless and until we don't have continuity of power. These kind of ideal situations can be actually twisted. That was what I was trying to pass the message to the countrymen. I don't see a problem for the next 5 years, because having seen what has happened in December, I think next 5 years are safe for India. And then for this kind of policy making, we'll do much, much better. And what could happen, we are going to have increased rural connectivity. The last man, the last corner of the country is going to get connected. Disaster management, when, most of your land terrestrial communication is going to face a big challenge. that is where this will come and help us big time, because we do understand what it is to, connect to a zone which is under a disaster. Social inclusion. That's a very big thing, because, you're going to have low cost connectivity services, the kind of digital bridge that we have actually crossed in the last 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. It's unprecedented. It's, the world, when my friends come from US and UK today, when they see that me, paying money for getting vegetables and pretty mundane things for my day-to-day life, they're pretty shocked. They didn't know how this happened, and they wonder as to why it's still, after this has happened in India, why it is still not happening in the US and UK. Because it takes something big, it takes a great decision. And mind you, when you get into the digital transaction mode, a lot of this black economy is actually eaten away. People can't hide their wealth, they can't hide their transactions, they will have to come clean, and that's what digitization brings onto the fora. And space, the spectrum will actually accelerate this and actually make more people embrace, and it will be available at a far lesser cost. And having said that, I will also tell you one more thing. Innovation and growth will definitely spur. Yes, today on the face of it, it looks like 5 big companies will benefit, but I'm pretty sure government will have 1 or 2 aces up the sleeve. I would want the government to have a pretty good chunk of that spectrum, be custodian to that spectrum, and dole it out to the startups. Dole it out to the startups, as part of its incubation and acceleration program. Since the DG ISPA is here, I think ISPA is a very good nodal agency to act as a custodian to actually integrate with the startups as well as with these, resources that the nation has. Once you do this, this is what it is all about. I've been trying to convince the government that you announced 6,000 crores for the AI roadmap. But where is that 6,000 going? If you go spending it on DRDOs and the PSU labs and your existing infrastructure, you are not going to be AI enabled. You need to put that money in the hands of private enterprise. And today the government, unfortunately, doesn't have a single scheme which actually crosses beyond 3 to 4 crores. And to be able to achieve that. And mind you, the generative AIs of the world where Sam Altmans have sprung up, they got millions of dollars in their funding to be able to build that kind of technology. See, technology today will not come free of cost. You need to, empower startups with money. You need to empower startups with technology resources. And startups which are involved in space, they need precious resources like spectrum. So if government becomes the 6th or the 7th state.
Right. General Bhatt, even if startups are not involved in space, they are going to in fact be using this particular privilege now to take advantage of, the ease of business that they can in fact have in India now.
So precisely the concern which he is expressing, that was our major concern, because we were not only looking at big players in satellite communication, we were very, very importantly looking at our startups. People in the future who would be using spectrum to produce different applications. And that is why the risk with auction was that somebody would have taken the spectrum who maybe required it or did not require it and would have voted it. But now, if the process is administrative, if after 3 years also a new startup wants the frequency, they will get it. They have to only manage the interference, but they are not prevented from taking the spectrum band, which today has been made available to 2, 3, 4 players. So that is one major advantage of this administrative allocation, that for eternity, spectrum will be available to new players coming, and new players who do not have very deep pockets.
All right, sir. Appreciate you joining us. We've run out of time, Professor Nalapat, and thanking our rest of the guests who are a part of this very important conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.